Page 36. Supplies would force the Jews to keep roads open for themselves, as well as the British. If the Jews failed, they could starve, and for military purposes the British could make other arrangements. This was clearly indicated last November 27, 2 days before the General Assembly passed its partition resolution, in instructions issued by the Chief Secretary of Palestine to military commanders and heads of government departments. In his directive of that date, he stated, activism in Jewish areas is likely to be negligible. Jews cannot afford to close roads for supplies, upon which they depend as their areas are not self-supporting. They will therefore do all they can to keep the roads open. Should, however, the situation develops adversely and supplies through Jewish areas not be possible, the following roads will be followed. Gaza-Haifa, Jerusalem-Haifa. B. More serious will be Arab troubles, which may assume large proportions and likely constitute a serious threat, especially in the hilly country. Arab villages and town are self-supporting, and the populace can forego a great deal, Jews cannot, and can therefore hamper seriously without much harm to themselves. Serious troubles may not come about until the end of the citrus season. Military authorities will decide in consultation with government, from time to time, as to the methods which should be adopted to safeguard military supplies. Government disposes of its property. 2. As early as April 1, the Land Settlement Department closed down its offices. This was done after the head of the department, R.F. Jardine, sold out the lands in the state domain to private persons, mostly Arabs. Parcels of land in the Haifa Harbor estate were sold by him. All plans and documents relating to irrigation projects in Palestine were shipped by him to the United Kingdom. Water installations were handed over to the Arab town and village councils. Having closed his offices, he secured release from his post, and has now been named by the Iraqi government as its irrigation expert. No possibility of handing over land registry to UN Commission. 3. The land registers have been distributed by the Palestine government among several centers, while microfilms of these registers have been shipped to England. The effect of this is to create chaos in the event of any disputes arising on land questions. This has been done despite the fact that on January 5, 1948, the Solicitor General of Palestine, M.J.P. Hogan, wrote to the Chief Secretary, "Under the law at present, any disposition of land, which has not yet received the consent of the Director of Land Registration, and is not perfected by the registration of a deed, is void." This means that if the land registries are closed, no valid disposition of land can be made. I understand that the Director of Land Registration has suggested that the land registries should be closed at least 2 weeks before the termination of the mandate, and should the end of the mandate be followed by an interregnum in the whole or any part of Palestine, it will not be possible there to make any valid disposition of land during that time. Disruption of postal services. 4. The disruption of the postal service has ensued as a result of instructions to create a vacuum. This is confirmed by Mr. Eric Mills, Commissioner of Withdrawals, who wrote, "The Postmaster General is proceeding in circumstances of great difficulty with his plans for withdrawal, but his recommendations on important point have been made on the assumption of a vacuum." On December 3, 1947, Mr. Mills, in a circular to heads of departments and district commissioners, declared, "You will observe that the information called for makes no distinction between withdrawal leaving a vacuum or handing over to a UNO commission. The reason for this lack of differentiation is that in either case a certain amount of derangement must be expected." Artificial deficit produced. 5. The Palestine Commission has charged the British government with deliberately inducing a deficit, where a surplus existed, and thus creating ensuing financial and economic difficulties. 4 specific charges in this connection are made by the Page 37. Commission in its reports, submitted both to the Security Council and to the General Assembly. It is stated that the deficit was created by the mandatory power, by charging against its funds what the Commission called certain extraordinary items, such as the maintenance of Jewish illegal immigration camps and the payment of pensions to British civil servants. The Commission objected to both these charges. As a further means of creating a deficit, the British paid out £300,000 recently to the Supreme Moslem Council, knowing full well that the treasury of this organization represents the war chest of the Mufti. The lack of a working fund, moreover, according to the Commission, has been created by the action of the Mandatory Power on March 20, 1948, in freezing an unspent balance of £3 million, remaining from 3 issues of bonds made in Palestine since 1947. This balance was invested in British securities, pending a general financial settlement, and the Mandatory Power had decided not to make any disbursements from this total prior to the termination of the mandate. These transactions were brought to the notice of the Commission only after they had been arranged. Discussing the disappearing surplus, the Commission charged on April 10 that the disappearance of the existing Treasury surplus is almost entirely due to special and extraordinary claims, which the Commission feels should not have precedence over securing essential food supplies and the provision of essential working funds. The Commission also expresses fears concerning the control of the Haifa dock by the Mandatory Power, pointing out that the ordinary revenue of Palestine after May 15th will depend in a high degree on customs duties on imports. These imports will come in mainly through the port of Haifa. Hence, the fiscal position will depend partly on the manner in which the control of the Haifa dock will be shared with evacuating troops between May 15th and August 1st. As a consequence of these acts, Palestine was in danger of suffering a famine as a result of food shortages which would be created by the termination of the mandate. Although the Palestine Commission had been discussing this problem for months and had even sent a special representative to London to take this matter up with the mandatory government, no agreement was reached. The excuse of the British government was that it could not undertake to make commitments for food after May 15th, as it had no funds with which to do so. Moreover, it refused to advance the money to the Palestine Commission, even on the promise that the United Kingdom would be reimbursed from the future revenues of Palestine. On April 19th, a private arrangement was agreed to by the importing firm of Steel Brothers in Palestine. The arrangement is with Steel Brothers, the Jewish Agency, and certain Arab chambers of commerce, and involves a transaction of about $5,200,000. Under this arrangement, Steel Brothers will guarantee to bring into Palestine, until July 15th, normal food supplies, in the amount of some 30,850 tons. Steel Brothers will advance 80% of the cost of wheat, meat, and sugar to be imported. The Jewish Agency will pay for 20% of the food going to the Jews, and the Arab Chamber of Commerce 20% for food going to Arabs. The food will be imported and delivered to the warehouses of Steel Brothers in Haifa. Distribution to the Arab and Jewish groups is left to the two communities. Palestine excluded from Sterling area. 6. The Palestine Commission also charged financial complications resulting from the action taken by the Mandatory Power of February 22, 1948, without consultation or even information to the Commission, blocking the accumulated Palestine sterling balances held in London and excluding Palestine from the Sterling area. The Commission describes the effect of this act as creating uncertainty among Palestine importers, and says that it regards that the release of the sterling balances in particular is essential. Otherwise, sterling may become a scarce currency of Palestine, and imports from the sterling area may be difficult to obtain. Page 38. 14. The breakdown of central authority. A continuous transfer of authority to municipal corporations and local councils by the Palestine administration has been going on based, not on a desire to prevent chaos, but rather to destroy central authority, to undermine partition, and to pave the way toward a revival of a scheme for a federal Palestine, which is the real British desire. Preparations for this transfer were made as far back as February 14, 1948 by Sir Henry Gurney, the Chief Secretary. In a communication on that date to heads of departments and district commissioners throughout Palestine, he proposed, "I am directed to refer to the preliminary advice which has been given to you by the Commissioner on Special Duty, to the effect that it is hoped that various government activities, buildings, stores, etc., will be transferred as it were in trust to local authorities, until a new central authority makes other arrangements. Action in this direction has been taken in certain matters, such as water supplies where experience is advisable, and central government staff is still available to give advice and assistance. I am now to require you to communicate to the District Commissioner of the district concerned full information regarding all other activities, buildings and stores which you consider might be similarly placed with local authorities, if the UN Commission in Palestine prove not to have the necessary powers and staff to perform all the functions of the Palestine government. I am also directed to say that a decision whether each such activity or property will finally be handed over to a local authority will depend on consultation with the UN Commission, but, unless the necessary preparatory work is done on this provisional basis, there will be not enough time later to make definite arrangements, under the general assumption which governs this direction. In February 1948, a special law, to amend the Municipal Corporation Ordinance of 1937, was enacted empowering municipal corporations and local councils to collect property taxes due up to April 1, 1948, and thereafter, for the fiscal year 1948 to 1949. The purposes of this new law were explained by the Attorney General in the following terms. It is anticipated that during the year 1948 to 49, the councils of municipal corporations and local councils will have to carry out many of the functions which would normally be carried out by government, and consequently they will need additional sources of revenue. On the other hand, they may not be able to obtain from the government the grants and aid which they have received in the past. Government has therefore decided to enable such councils to collect and recover arrears of urban property tax remaining due on the first day of April, 1948, and urban property tax due in respect of the year 1948 to 49, and this draft ordinance is designed to give effect to that decision. Arrangements will be made for the handing over to such councils of the records relating to the house property and land, in respect of which they will be entitled to collect and cover urban property tax, and such councils will be empowered to do such acts as may be necessary to ensure that those records will be kept up to date. Furthermore, in order that it will not be necessary to prepare during the year 1948 to 49 valuation lists, to replace those valuation lists, which on the first day of April 1949 will have been in force for 5 years, the period of validity of valuation lists has been extended from 5 to 6 years. Anticipated no successor government. The draft law, it was explained in a communication by Mr. L.B. Gibson, Attorney General of Palestine, to Sir Henry Gurney, was in anticipation of the possibility of no successor government being named. He declared, "My view is that it is not for this government to legislate for things after the termination of the mandate, at least if there is some other government which enjoys legislative authority after that date. We should, however," page 39, "make available our draft to the Commission, and there would be advantages in publishing it as part of the bill, so that any public comment would be available for the benefit of the Commission. We should, no doubt, inform the Commission that, although we had published the bill in its entirety, we did not intend in fact to enact the second schedule ourselves. But there is a further question of whether we should tell the public the same thing when publishing the bill for public information. On the whole, I think it is unnecessary to do so, because in the event of there being no successor government, we might enact the second schedule before we leave, but we do not want to discuss such possibilities in public notices. Arabs chief beneficiaries of transfers. As a result of this special legislation, the 3 regions heavily populated by Jews have been placed under Jewish control. All the remaining regions have been left to the Arabs. The exceptions are Jerusalem, Haifa, the Valley of Esdraelon, and Eastern Galilee. Ceded to the Arabs were such important installations as the water plants at Ras El Ain and Safed. In addition, the Arabs have received most of the government services including health, education, social welfare, agriculture, and broadcasting department services, which are paid for by the taxes imposed on the population, to which the Arabs, constituting 2/3 of the population of Palestine, contribute 26%, and the Jews 74%. In dividing the assets of the country, the British allocated for themselves the Haifa enclave with all its services and installations. Page 40. 15. How the British safeguard their interests in Palestine. While liquidating the mandate, the British have concentrated on safeguarding in perpetuity the British hold in Palestine in key areas, including Haifa and the Negev, and to ensure uninterrupted lines of communication by air, sea, and land. New laws to assure British airfields in Palestine. 1. Thus, on March 2, 1948, the Attorney General of Palestine drafted a law, the purpose of which is to establish the legal basis for transferring airfields or other lands, now held in the name of the High Commissioner, to various British ministries for war, air, or to the President of the Air Council in London. In particular, the new legislation aims to assure continued British control of the RAF stations in Acre, Ramel, Gaza, as well as certain property in Jerusalem. Preparations for this action began in October 1947, while the General Assembly for the United Nations was in session. On October 19, 1947, in a secret dispatch cabled to the Air Ministry in London, from Air Headquarters Levant, the Air Ministry was informed that, in view of the political situation, legal difficulties might arise with respect to the property bought by the Air Ministry in Palestine, held in the name of the High Commissioner in trust for the RAF. In subsequent cables, in view of the pending liquidation of the Palestine government, warning was given that the British government might lose control of these assets, and that action was necessary. This is explained in the following exchange of cables. From Air Headquarters Levant to Air Ministry. OX 303, October 19th. Secret. Subject registration of properties acquired in Palestine on behalf of RAF. 1. All property bought by Air Ministry in Palestine, held in name of High Commissioner in trust for RAF. Leases held name of High Commissioner in trust for RAF. Held similar manner. 2. In view of political situation of entries in land registers, appear to be open to objection from legal point of view. 3. Palestine government request decision made into whose name this property and leases should be vested. 4. Request you advise. From Air Ministry London to HQ Medan. F. 7283/4 November. Unclassified. Reference Levant Signal 0.303 October repeated to you on subject registration of properties acquired in Palestine on behalf RAF. Colonial Office had no knowledge of this question, and we find it difficult to know precisely what is the tenor and purpose of Palestine government's suggestion. Request you investigate and advise us in greater detail what are government's proposals and why they are put forward. We are quite ready to consider them. From HQ Levant to Air Ministry. 0.63 November 12th. Secret. Your F. 7283 November 4th and my 0.303 October 17th. Subject registration of properties acquired Palestine on behalf RAF. 1. On acquisition it has been customary to enter this property in the land registry in the name of the High Commissioner in trust for the President of the Air Council, or in some cases the Secretary of State for Air. The position of trust in Palestine law is obscure, and this form of registration may be open to objection on that account alone. In addition, registration in name of High Commissioner might give rise to difficulties, particularly when government of Palestine is transferred from High Commissioner to Palestinian, or to a UNO authority, and it seems desirable that the land should be registered directly, in the name of whatever authority the Air Force considers most appropriate, either the President or the Air Council or the Secretary of State for Air. 2. Legal advice is that if properties remain in page 41, name of High Commissioner, there is risk that we may lose all chance of realizing value or of retaining control of these assets. 3. Main properties concerned are RAF stations Acre, Ramel, Gaza, and certain property in Jerusalem. As the result of this exchange, a draft law was prepared by the Attorney General, transferring the land now registered in the name of the High Commissioner to the British Secretary of State for War, the British Secretary of State for Air, or the President of the Air Council in London. In submitting a draft of this proposed law to the Chief Secretary of Palestine, the Attorney General stated, "It is probable that when all parties concerned have approved the substance of the bill, we shall convert it into an order, under the Palestine Order in Council 1948. But I think that the first step is to get the earliest possible consideration by the parties concerned. The transfer of the Hejaz Railway. 2. Early in 1948, the Hejaz Railway linking Palestine, Transjordan, and Syria was transferred by the Palestine government to the government of Transjordan. The explanation given was that actually the British government was the mandatory power, initially for Transjordan as well as Palestine, and therefore was trustee for Transjordan. Transfer of the El Kantar Rafah line to the Egyptian State Railways. 3. On April 1, 1948, the El Kantar Rafah railway line was turned over to the Egyptian State Railways by the Palestine government. The Egyptian railway system is partially controlled by British capital. Moreover, the El Kantar Rafah line links with Rafah in the southern Negev, now being transformed into a military base by the British. By disposing of the El Kantar Rafah railway and the Hejaz railway, the British government has attempted to seal off Jewish Palestine from access to the outside world. The El Kantar Rafah railway is the principal Palestine railway connection to the outside world and consists of 3 sections. 1. The El Kantara-Rafah line, which starts at El Kantara in the Suez Canal, continues across the Sinai Peninsula into Rafah, Palestine. 2. The Rafah-Lydda link to Jerusalem. 3. The Rafah-Haifa connection. The Kantara-Rafah line, built by the British during World War I, was owned by the British government, with a 12% share of the capital held by the Palestine government. Until its transfer, it had been operated by the Palestine Railways, in behalf of the British government. All profits have gone to the British government with the exception of 12%, the proportion to the Palestine government. The Rafah-Haifa line was sold to the government of Palestine after the establishment of the Mandate. In disposing of the El Kantara-Rafah line to the Egyptian Railways, which British capital also owns, the British have assured themselves a continuous railway connection from the port of Haifa to Egypt, where their soldiers are still stationed. They have also assured a railway link between their new military encampment at Rafah and their military encampment in Egypt. At the same time, by placing this railway link in the hands of the Arabs, they have placed the railway access of the Jewish community to the outside world at the mercy of the Arabs. The Hijaz Railway, built by the Turks, has been under British control, although its ownership remains in dispute. In a survey of Palestine, submitted to the Anglo-American Committee of Inquiry by the Palestine administration, it is stated that the Hijaz Railway is operated by Palestine Railways, in behalf of His Majesty's government who hold it in trust. The Hijaz Railway runs from Damascus, Syria to Ma'an, Transjordan, from Ma'an to Haifa in Palestine. 2 branch lines from Haifa run, from Haifa to Acre and from Haifa to Zamak in Palestine, which is just south of Lake Tiberias. The effect of the transaction is to assure British rail connections, from Haifa to Transjordan and uninterrupted military links, between the military enclave in Haifa and the British military base in Transjordan, which continues to exist under the new British military treaty with Transjordan.